Welcome to Post-Plant Episode 2. This is the Katowice special, and I'm here in Katowice, Poland, with the Spodek right behind me. This site is somewhat of a pilgrimage for many Counter-Strike fans all over the world, and in that arena right behind me, legends were born.
On the newest acquisition, and it's all done. Fnatic are your IEM champions in 2018. Astralis again in Katowice. The Visa 2020 champions. It's done. 21 champions. It's Gambit.
Bomb has been planted.
Welcome back to Post-Plant, ladies and gentlemen. It's episode 2. This is the show where we take some extra time to look at some specific rounds, break down moments from the previous event, and this is the Katowice special. So we're going to be focusing on everything IM Katowice, right from the play-ins to the group stages and into the playoffs as well. This tournament was packed full of action, and luckily beside me I have got Maui, Snake, Hawka, and Bleh, wonderful analysts that will be taking us through this one. And we've got some extra tools this time. Anders was kind enough to give us some access to Skybox, so we're going to be seeing how that goes. We did have one of our producers have a bit of an emergency, so bear with us if any technical difficulties do come through. But first of all, Bleh, you know, I did go down to Katowice. I filmed that intro there, but the main thing I wanted to find there was that Indian restaurant you said was pretty good. I couldn't find it, so you're gonna have to show me it next time.
That is the best Indian food you'll find in EU. I'm not even kidding. I went there. I think they have like a couple of actual Indians tied down in the kitchen, which is why it's really, really good. I'm not even making this up. I saw a couple of them. I'm like, those are actual Indians.
What's the secret ingredient?
I wonder what my cousin went.
Indian sweat. What is it?
No. An actual cook, you know?
Yes.
And that's the worst about like having Indian food in like EU. Most of them, it's not really Indian food. But yeah.
I mean, I can't deal well with spice. Can you? I feel like you could handle some good food though, Maui. You're in general eating some pretty good food. I see it in your Instagram stories. You good with spice?
Yeah, I'm pretty good with spice. And the thing is that if you have a little bit too much spice, you just need your probiotics. Get your kombuchas, get your yogurts. If you have any of those, I mean, everything's just gonna flush out the way that it needs to. Just take care of your gut flora.
Well, Hulk, I don't even need to ask you really about how you handle spice. Now, swiftly moving on, we are going to be taking a look at how Katowice played out. You and me both, Hulk, let's be real. I mean, you're the most basic guys possible. But we take a look at Katowice as a whole, and we look at how the whole tournament played out, right? We had this sort of format that developed and allowed us to get all the best teams in the world. And obviously, a lot of people were saying if this was a LAN event, it would be one of the best of all time. It just had pretty much every one of the best teams in the main event. What did you guys make of the whole format really and how it worked out? Hulk, I'll start with you.
Yeah, the weird thing about this format is there's almost part of me, and I know I shouldn't say this, but there's almost part of me that wishes there were a few like weaker teams at this event, because you're just struggling to keep track of everything, right? In the group stage, there's just great games on all the time. I almost wish there were like a Ty Lue here, Bleh, so we could just see them on the B stream, know they're going to lose, and then not have to care about that game.
Yeah, true. Wow, low blow, Hawka, but I have to agree with you. Tyler would have been absolutely wrecked here. I actually like the format. I think the format is pretty good. Sure, I did have my criticism of it initially, where you had these opening best of ones coming in, but with all the elimination games and all the lower bracket matches are all best of 3, so really no big complaints there. And considering how many teams were playing, how many games we had, how many simultaneous streams we had as well, I can completely understand why ESL went with the best of 1 format to open things up. Although, looking at a few of these games, I feel like there could have been a world where we might have seen a couple of upsets taking place, like Mouse and Renegades, for example, the best of 1, 16-14, coming down to Renegades choking the final round. If we had best of 3 series, I wanted to see how Dexter would really fare against his old team, for example. So a couple of smaller storylines I felt could have been more laid out if you had a best of 3 opening. But apart from that, no major criticisms from my end.
See with you, Maui?
I like BO1s, actually. I think BO1s have a lot more validity now that the economy has shifted, because it's not like you're going to see, you know, 2 bad reset rounds and then the whole game just spiral out of control for one half. Now there's more gun rounds, there's less variants. The teams that have game plans can run those game plans if they so choose. I feel like it only hurts teams that are really risky with their economic decisions. There are a couple of teams here that are like that, but for the most part, when I watch these games, most of them played out, I would say, the way that I expected.
Yeah, I think that's really what happened, because you look at the main tournament, right, through the play-ins, even though we had best of ones, you still ended up with all the best teams, right? And the only team that didn't make it through was Complexity, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But first of all, I want to talk about the main storyline of this tournament as a whole, and it was the fact that CIS teams were just so dominant in this tournament, right? So many of them coming out. They've been an incredible rise so far, you know, throughout this year and last year. They've been really starting to get very comfortable. A couple of them have made some really solid roster moves recently as well that's allowed them to go to the next level. But when we look at CIS Counterstrike, the biggest criticism we have right now around them, or a lot of people have, I don't know if I have it per se, but it's that they're onliners, Hawka, right? They're not really here to stay. It's only because this is the online era. Do you read into that much, or do you feel like they've actually got some respect deserved to go their way?
Yeah, I think considering some of the teams are just lesser known, I think people are maybe a bit more wary of them. Like, think of some of the other teams that have come up, even the teams like Heroic and Big, who have come through and win tournaments at times. It's not from out of nowhere, whereas I think for some people this probably feels a bit more out of nowhere, so they're a bit confused. They're like, okay, I've got to find a reason in my brain. Why is this going on? You kind of want to call them onliners, but I think when you watch them play, they're doing really well, and if anything, they're the ones probably adapting to just playing online well, which is part of it. But there is obviously fundamentals behind what they're doing a lot of the time as well. I mean, you look at their AWPers specifically, their AWPers are generally actually super passive, right? They're actually not super aggressive, which is maybe the role you'd expect online to see just some crazy aggressive AWPer take over a game. So there's a lot of different facets to these teams' games, I think.
Yeah, and that leads me on to my next question, really. I'll start by asking you, Maui, because I think you have some strong opinions of this. But, you know, the term that gets thrown around a lot, I've been thinking about this quite a bit, is just everybody kind of uses the cop-out. They use CIS Counterstrike, right? They're playing CIS Counterstrike, and they kind of use this as an umbrella term. There's so many different approaches within CIS Counterstrike in the way that they play, the differences between Gambit, the differences between how VP play. It's just too much of a broad title to put over so many of these different teams, especially because they play so differently.
Yeah, I would not just characterize them all as playing the same way. And when people say CIS Counter-Strike, I've kind of had to take a deep dive myself into what that exactly means. So I watched some Spirit games, I watched some VP games. Everybody saw Gambit, of course. I mean, comparing this to Forza or other teams like Namiga and Espada that we saw in the last year that were playing well, I don't feel like there's one true style for CIS. But I will say that I feel like the thing that CIS teams have done very well, a couple of them, in Spirit and VP in particular, is that they have outlined that they have these point guys. And I want to point to Mirror for Spirit, and I want to point to Yakinder for VP. These riflers that are just hyper aggressive, are always looking to find that first frag for their team. But when you look at a team like Gambit, they don't do that exactly. It changes. They have a different type of style, a different type of win condition. I'd say Gambit have a much more passive approach. But if people still label them as CIS, I think it's a little bit almost disingenuous to viewers. If they are not really sure what that means, then they might just conjure up this picture of what Gambit's doing that might not be entirely accurate.
You got any follow-up thoughts on that, Bleh? Because I know you've had some input on this topic.
I agree. I was watching all these teams more in depth because I wanted to talk about like Spirit, you know, how they were able to get that 16-1 win over Astralis. You see Gambit playing, you see VP playing, all different styles, different approaches coming in, where it's kind of like I guess CIS Counter-Strike for a lot of people would be the individual aggressiveness coming out in certain moments, right? For example, try to remember that game against Liquid. We saw how VP was just popping off. We had Jame and we had players like Yakinder, for example. Now, it could be the online component coming into play, but I feel like a lot of these teams, once they start getting on a roll, so to speak, you see some of the players who don't necessarily step up crazy or don't go for these aggressive plays start to play a little bit more uncharacteristic compared to how they usually do. Jame, for example, the T side with the AWP and Mirage was going for some ridiculous plays, things you don't tend to see from any top tier team. Forget VP because they are way more passive in their approach when it comes to, Jame, especially with the AWP, right? So I feel like it's a mixture of multiple things, but the CIS terminology, I feel, is about this tendency of the teams to kind of morph into a more aggressive, in-your-face FU style of CS, which we tend to see at times where they just go in for the kill. They just try to finish off the team, whoever they're facing off against. So that I feel like that's what people mean when they say CIS Counter-Strike, but not about really, trying to break down the actual fundamentals of how these teams play.
Do you have anything to add to that, Hawka?
I think as well, you look at someone like Jame, for example, and something that's just constantly been talked about by teams is how annoying it is for him to basically seemingly always have an AWP just with the way that Virtus.pro play. And I think that there is something that's very efficient almost in the way he tries to make sure he always has that AWP in his hands, even if he's not always putting the pressure on. But like Bleh said, there were actually rounds where he was getting way more involved than we're used to seeing. So I think in general, yeah, these teams play pretty differently. When I look at Spirit, for example, I kind of feel like they're maybe the closest to the sort of classic CIS style in some senses, where I feel like their game is the most basic. I feel like it's the most rudimentary, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because there are a lot of teams that do that really well, and you don't need to have some crazy tactical mastermind to be able to win games. These teams are skilled enough where they can just have good fundamentals and they can win games, and that's what Spirit, I would say, have their strength in doing. But teams like Gambit and Virtus.pro have a lot of other aspects of their game for sure.
Yeah, I think the question is going to be quite a difficult one to answer fully without really knowing. It's just kind of predicting the future. Obviously, when you look at how these teams play and how they approach Counter-Strike, none of these guys, none of these big star and heavy hitters that were near the top of the rankings in this tournament have really played at any significant LAN events, right? Yukindar, he's really got into his team during the online era. He was playing with Waylander back in Pro, still not really doing a whole lot, and his talent was just kind of building up in those tournaments. But, you know, you've seen Sh1ro pop off in this tournament, but will this really continue when we head to LAN, Maui? Because when you look at the LAN stage, it's going to be a far bigger step up than you think for a lot of these guys. And, you know, for Yukindar to carry the same confidence forward, it's going to be quite difficult.
I think there's two aspects of switching to LAN that may hinder players like Yukindar, and I don't know, maybe a little bit Spirit as well, but I think one is definitely going to be the nerves. I think that's just the most basic concept of what makes LAN different. The fact that more experienced players are better at keeping their nerve, they're better at keeping their cool and following whatever it is their game plan is, even in the most hectic of moments, where online it's relatively easy to follow your game plan because you can always just kind of, step up from your gamer chair, just walk to the bathroom, wash your hands or something like that. You can even do it between rounds. You can't do that at a LAN. And I think the other thing is that holding with a rifle with 0 ping is a lot easier. So if someone's swinging into you with a rifle, if you're that passive M4, you can just nail him, laser beam him in the face. And so sometimes those aggressive rifle plays that aren't supported by great utility or spacing from teammates, it'll be a little bit more difficult to just have those big pop-off openers.
Yeah, I actually, on the ping topic, I think it's actually something people don't really look at that often, but interviews given by Twist, he was saying that some of the stuff he does on LAN, he can't actually do when he's playing online in North America, right? That was a big problem for his individual performance. When he was playing in NA, he couldn't do the same stuff that he could do when he was playing on a low-tier ping or on LAN. So I think that that's certainly something that we're going to get to see. And of course, when we get back to LAN, we're going to get to see the best Counter-Strike come through again. We're going to get to see maybe the clash of styles that we've been used to for so long and really see where it goes. I think we're heading into a very exciting time where we're kind of coming out of this online era and this style of Counter-Strike into something we're more used to. But Hawka, you got anything you want to add to that, or do you have any other talking points based on that?
I think the one thing I would add on to what Maui was saying is that the really nice thing about Virtus.pro specifically is that we have actually had the chance to hear more from them, more in depth on Maui's podcast, actually. Yukindar actually talked about how Virtus.pro think about the game. And sometimes because just the CIS region is kind of far removed from what we're used to on the EU broadcast, maybe, we don't really get to hear that in a sense. We don't really get to hear that they actually have this view for the game and they actually have a lot of ideas behind what they're doing. And so that gives me a bit more faith that Yukindar can maybe continue to pull off some of these plays once we get back to LANs, because they actually clearly have plans formulated a lot of the times and good ideas behind why they're wanting to push spots.
Well, I think we've set the scene pretty well of what's coming up next in the show. We're going to be taking a deep dive after the break into some of the plays of the play-ins, the group stages, and of course the playoffs. We're going to be looking at all the CIS rounds. We're going to be jumping into Skybox and getting to see what went wrong for some of our more fabled teams in the form of Astralis and Liquid. We're going to get to see what went wrong for them. And that's coming up after the break, so make sure you don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this.
Bomb has been planted.
Breakdown segment of the show where we take a closer look at some of the rounds that we thought were pretty cool throughout the event. And we're going to start it by just looking at the play-ins and really taking a closer look into what we've got here. I'm joined by Hawka, Bleh, and Maui Snake. I had the order locked in, but then Bastion's actually changed the way you guys are sitting, so I need to get into the mindset of Hawka coming first here. But now we get into the Skybox segment, and we were talking about Cloud9, right? And this team coming into the play-ins, there's a lot of storylines surrounding them. They've just switched out Alex from Awping to Esatag Awping. With the removal of Woxic, it's kind of left them in a weird place, Alex. And you want to just really talk about Esatag and show us some of the rounds he's involved in.
Yeah, I wanted to show what Esatag's been doing on the team now, because I think how they use him going forwards is going to be a big question mark for Cloud9 if he's going to be switching to this AWP role. So we're looking at Overpass here, where I think Esatag does a really great job on CT's side. Currently, Alex is AWPing on that A-bomb site. Esatag plays as the rotator on B. And this is something you're going to see a lot from Cloud9 early. They nade out this door. They molly off short to begin with. And Esatag right now is just jump peeking for information into short. They do this a lot at the start of rounds. They don't necessarily fully go for this short control, as I think we're having technical issues, which is always fun. Always fun. We'll try and get that fixed.
Yeah, we'll try and get that fixed. I think we can actually just dive into that talking point, first of all, when we look at Esatag as the AWPer now, this team, and I'll get your thoughts on it, Maui, because, you know, we've been looking at this Cloud9 team. They've kind of had this start where they talk about themselves being the Colossus. They get to bring in a bunch of big names. They sign Alex on a big contract. They bring in Esatag, meant to be the star player. And now they've ended up with him just having to go to the AWP role because they've gotten rid of Woxic. So this team's in a really weird spot right now.
Yeah, I feel like this is not the best look for Cloud9, given that, you know, you signed the Star Opper, you were trying to play with OC originally with this lineup, and now you're using the guy you're paying the absolute most on the op when he was supposed to be your best rifler. It's a weird look for Cloud9, but I actually think this can work. I actually think this is better than Alex Awping for sure, because when I think about Alex's prowess on Vitality at the end of 2019, when they were on the when they were actually peaking, it was Sh1ro as their best player, and for me, Alex was actually their second best player, and he was this mobile rifler that always was able to control a lot of different situations. And so now that he's freed up and he's off the op, and now Esatag can just focus on that, I think actually Cloud9 might see some greater heights, because this team has only, I think, reached top 20, I think ranked 20, which is, for the amount of money Henry G has sunk into this project, would be a failure in my eyes. I think they are bound to be a top 12 team within a couple of months.
I mean, they're just about avoiding those supposed, well, talked about flashpoint fines. So, I mean, that's literally the only team that's actually put the money in to try and build up a team. Obviously, there hasn't been any fines handed out. Don't really know about that. But nonetheless, you know, this team has been put together to be a team that competes near the top and hasn't really been able to do that. But I agree. I think Esatag has shown that he's been able to op. Bleh, are you along the same vein of thought here?
I feel it's a little optimistic. I agree with Matt with the role wise. Like, this could work out, but it's a big could, right? I don't really think it's necessarily going to be a top 12 in the next couple of months, in all honesty. I feel the good signs is Zeppela coming in. The youngsters, the ones who aren't as expensive, are actually doing a pretty good job. I feel like, you know, you have like Floppy, you have Zeppa, they've been looking pretty solid. I was actually very impressed with Zeppa playing alongside Mezzi as well, considering how young they are and how they do lack experience when it comes to playing tier 1 opposition. I think they did a pretty decent job over in Katowice. Obviously not qualifying for the main event. It's still, you know, it's still not a good showing overall, but I feel like they will be in a top 20 spot. They will rise up. But looking at the competition we have right now, especially in the online era and everything, and looking at the teams playing in Pro League at the moment, maybe if they get cracked top 16, top 15, I'll be surprised.
Well, Hawka, we're going to try Skybox again, see if we can dive in and take a look at this. Hopefully it's all good now. But we are going to take a look at Esatag in this round. You could talk us through it, Alex. Hopefully it's all good.
Yeah, so I'm going to play, and there we go. It is playing this time.
Woo!
So we get Zeppa using early nades here. He's going to molly off short and nade out the door. It's Zeppa who uses these nades early, so Esatag can keep a full set of utility, which is a really nice way to start the round, because Zeppa's just kind of anchoring the site anyway. Esatag is the man rotating, so he wants that full set of utility, being able to move around. Issa now is going to counter with a smoke to try and move up connector safely, but Esatag has some ideas on how to deal with this. Nade over the top, does damage, spam through the door, Issa's dead. That is annoying as hell. And then Esatag is so active with how he plays on this CT side. If we go into his POV, he's going to flash peek his teammates at Monster so that they can get information at B. Then we're going to see him rotate up to A, which happens a lot. They stack 3 onto this A site, and you're going to see here it's just a cleanup at the end of the round against pistols mainly this time, so nothing too crazy at the end here, but just having 3 players on A makes a big difference. And the question I have going forwards with these roles is, how much are we going to see Esatag Awping in general? Because Alex wasn't picking it up that much. And how often are we going to see Esatag switching up these spots? Because I think he's really good in some of these versatile sort of rotator roles. And I do think there's options on CT side where Alex could still AWP if he wanted to. I think he's fine at AWPing. So I'm just really intrigued to see how that goes going forwards, whether Esatag is always going to be AWPing or if we get to see some of this rifling, because I think he has a lot of strengths there.
Yeah, I think the 2 teams that Esatag's played in where he's been forced to AWP or is sort of based on the conditions, he's being able to pick up that AWP. He's always had someone that can pick up the AWP alongside him. Now we see Alex, he's capable of doing it. Not really in his career really seen as an AWPer, but nonetheless can do it. Has shown his proficiency on it. In his old team in Heroic, when he had to AWP a little bit, Nato Safix is on the team, so you definitely have that capability of him switching back to the rifle whenever he decides to. And let's talk about Esatag, because I feel like this player is very versatile in what he does play. You know, he has so many options available to him. He may not be the best at his role at certain times, you know, entry fragging, but generally he's very good. He has a good level of pretty much everything.
Yeah, it's just that he don't get me wrong, he is a good player. He is a very solid player. It's just not worth the paycheck, in my honest opinion. I know I don't want to get into the memes, you know, everyone said it. It's been done to that. I don't want to bring it up here, but sure, you saw that great stat. Against who? Movistar Riders, right? And this team's been together for a while right now, and I'm assuming him and Alex are going to be like the 2 big dogs in the team, right? You have these 3 youngsters. They're the 2 guys who have to really live up to their billing, so to speak. And it just doesn't make sense. If he was playing in a lesser team, like let's say he was in, let's say, Copenhagen Wolves, for example, right? I'd be like, yeah, he's doing a great job. He's fantastic. Could be the best player, but right now, it doesn't balance for me from a more holistic perspective, not just about being in the server.
You got any thoughts on that, Maui, on Esatag as a player? I know when you were a little bit more critical of him sometimes in terms of him being an entry fragger, that was what he's brought into this team to do. Yeah, to me, I definitely agree with you in sort of looking at some of the early games from him. You know, sometimes he was struggling a little bit in that entry role. Do you still think along the same vein of thought?
I actually think that he's slotted in decently for Cloud9. I feel like the reason they're losing isn't necessarily because of any individual. I feel like this team just hasn't ironed out all their protocols or kind of like how they want to play mid-late rounds all the time, which I thought would come, you know, a little bit faster given that they first signed Kassad, then they went for Alex. I felt like this team was going to have a lot of tactical depth, a lot of strategy, but with the falling out of Kassad and the fact that it feels like it's just this revolving door of players, I just feel like it's always difficult to be really solid in mid-round situations if you're always playing with a new 5th. So I think that as an individual, Esatag is actually doing just fine. I feel like his pedigree before this, I mean, it's a little bit mixed. I don't think he was ever really a star entry fragger, so it was confusing when he was brought in with that role, but I think that overall he's been doing a decent job. I feel like everybody on Cloud9's been doing just all right. I don't think anybody's really excelling, no one's popping off, and no one's really falling that far behind either. I was a little bit worried about how Mezzi's transition was going to be to the tier 1 space, but I actually think he's slotted in pretty well on top of that.
So, Hawka, when we look at Cloud9 in this tournament so far, obviously they were one of the big orgs, one of the names that have spent a lot to get their team into this position. Do you feel like this is a disappointment for Cloud9 coming into Katowice? Do you feel like you would have at least liked to have made the mid-tournament?
I mean, yes, but at the same time, it's just this team is in a really weird spot right now with everything going on. They've just never had that stable period where they actually get the chance to prove whether or not they're really worth the investment. They've never really been able to do that. I think the question I'm just going to have looking forwards is Esatag switching to the AWP. How much is that going to come through? Because at this tournament, I was looking at the numbers. Alex had 0.12 AWP kills per round, which is basically the same as most other teams' secondary AWPers. So that's the same sorts of numbers as Stewie or Rops on the AWP. He's getting the same amount of kills roughly as those guys. And he had, more importantly, 37 AK kills versus 20 AWP kills at this tournament. Now, it's a small sample size, but the thing I'm really interested in is, does Esatag always AWP on T side? Is he still going to be playing an aggressive rifle role? Do they think they need an AWPer in all the spots on all the maps? I'm really going to be looking at that going forwards, because I think there are definitely some teams that are proving, you don't need an AWPer all the time, right? You don't necessarily need to have someone sniping all the time. And if you don't have that clear-cut AWPer, you might want to go 5 rifles sometimes.
Well, I think we kind of all agree Cloud9 in a very weird spot right now. We'll give them more time to really see how this new transition works out. We'll see how they perform. But, you know, in the future, we're definitely expecting them to get a lot more than they currently are. But moving on to a team that is kind of weird. You know, they made a recent roster move as well. They brought in Sh1ro. It's going to be Fnatic. And, I mean, these guys, they just played really well at CS Summit, right? Second place, 300K event. I did look into their sort of run there because there was 2 simultaneous events running at that time, and I was working one of them. But I did look it back, and you know, Fnatic didn't play the best teams at that tournament, but still making a final looked pretty solid. Then coming into this tournament, Maui, and they lost to MIBR.
Yeah, that wasn't a great look. So we can jump into the Skybox here, and the way that this was just not a great game for Fnatic. So this is actually the final map to send Fnatic out, and it was versus MIBR, and this is not a great scoreline. And I just want to show how confident MIBR was playing against Fnatic and how little Fnatic was willing to challenge this MIBR team. So what we'll see early on here is just some early space being contested from Yell onto Crims. And then I want you guys to just focus here on Dinko here, which is actually, he's making his way through Divider, and he's using no utility. And this felt like a team like Fnatic should just not be so... I feel like they just gave up so much space for the entire game. Like, they had a very hard time actually contesting, and they were always on the back foot. And this MIBR team, I felt like they just disrespected them completely. They were running out in positions without actually using utility. And then what you'll see at this point is that the late round mid call, or the mid-late round call, is really easy for MIBR because they know they push all of these players back from Fnatic onto this A bomb site, and now they can just do a really simple B pop, and they probably are going to either catch Fnatic off guard or at least just down numbers, and that's all they have to do here. And it's how they just put their foot on the throats of Fnatic. And really, that's pretty much the point here I wanted to make, that MIBR are a team that, you know, I don't feel like they're the most well-drilled team. I feel like they actually have some really solid skills, some solid pieces behind them, but they should not be taking down a team like Fnatic. And that is more or less I mean, the 2v5 is not going to go the way of Fnatic, so we can shift off of that. And all in all, I just felt like this Fnatic team, like, they couldn't contest for space. And I hear that certain pro players are talking about how they want to just up their individual skill. And I felt like a few months ago, that felt like a really bad game plan, just focusing on individual skill. But you can see that when Fnatic were actually too afraid to just fight and contest some of the positions there, that a team like MIBR was just, okay, if you want to give us all that space for free, we'll just take all that space.
Yeah, and the individual skill is a very good talking point in this as well, because if you go back and you look at the stats of that best of 3, the top player for Fnatic was actually their new player Sh1ro, right? And some of the more star players, you know, JW we were talking about earlier on this year or last year, you know, his return to form looking solid, Brawlin being that consistent player for them, that no one was really showing up on that front, Bleh. And so do you agree with Maui, you know, Fnatic just not really able to keep up in this tournament? Do you feel like maybe this just didn't get going because they only played 2 games, right? And so maybe they just need to grow into the tournament a little bit, but obviously this is not going to be a performance they'll be happy with.
Yeah, I mean, they should be, right? And I'm just taking a look at who the teams where they played. They played MIBR and they lost to OG. They lost very, very convincingly to OG as well.
Yeah.
I feel like Fnatic are not playing the way I'm used to seeing them play, to put it very simply. Like, I think Maui pointed out perfectly, and I feel like I don't think it's a mental thing either. I mean, these are a bunch of veterans who have won some of the biggest tournaments ever, right? But the way they're approaching it, they're not making their opponents sweat. Go back to how you remember Fnatic, right? Fnatic, a team where on the CD side, as a team, you're going to be playing default. You're just going to be waiting for them to push in and just be very irritating. Just, you know, they're going to be going for these opening picks. They're going to be making you feel very antsy. You're going to be very worried about them catching you off guard with the pants down, with setting up for a take or something. We really weren't seeing anything here. They were playing a very reactive style, so to speak. And I don't know. I'll be very honest. I don't know what changed compared to the previous event where we saw Sh1ro's debut, where they were looking pretty damn fantastic. So I'm just gonna put this as a blip on the radar of Fnatic. I still believe that this unit they still have a bit of gas remaining in them, and maybe the next event might be something a little bit more different.
Do you think, Hawka, when you look at Fnatic, they have just made a roster move, and we would usually give a team like this so much room to breathe, right? Because they've just made a complete rookie move. No one really knows who Jackinho is. A lot of the Swedish players didn't even know who he was. Get Right had no idea. So this player is definitely very fresh to this level, and usually we would give a team like that some props and say, okay, you could have some time to really work this in. But Fnatic, just because they had such a good run the first time out, we kind of look at this as just what the hell happened, right? They just come out of a tournament summit, then they just drop off completely. Do you have anything to add on to what Maui and Bleh were saying, or do you have your own take on it?
I didn't get to see them as much as I would have wanted to. I mean, I know they didn't play many maps, but again, I didn't really get to properly look at them in depth. But just looking at some of the numbers, like some of the numbers in theory are there for them to have done better at this tournament. Because even though they only played 3 maps, Brolan actually has really high success in opening kills. I think he had the highest out of anyone in this play-in stage. I think he was joint with Hampus, sorry, but still, he was doing well in opening kills, which is normally something that Fnatic want. The thing that really strikes out, though, on those stats is their CT ratings suck. They clearly struggled on CT. And I think whenever I watch Fnatic play, the thing that would come back to for me is I feel like they should have more of an ability to make solo plays at times, and they don't. But more importantly, I feel like they could do better at times on some maps at actually sort of taking space early in the round, like Maui was kind of pointing out there in that Skybox. Like they just didn't really ever take much space. And I'd have thought they'd be able to do that, because Fnatic are a team who generally like to kind of brawl, you would think. They would like to fight a bit. And we didn't really see that from them there. And maybe they're just not having the ideas set in place to get that going at the start of the round. But yeah, it's a disappointing event. I still think when you only play 3 maps, I'm not going to be too harsh, because I still think there are some good maps for Fnatic that they just didn't play here. So I think hopefully going forward, they can show us more.
Yeah, I think it's just we're more hypercritical because of the teams they lost to, right? The fact that it is the MIBR lost 2-0, it is OG who were struggling for a long time, and just making that switch right after the tournament. But any final thoughts on Fnatic, Maui? I know you're a big fan of the Fnatic team.
Yeah, I like seeing Fnatic succeed, and I feel like right now they've just kind of lost some of that edge in terms of like the push and pull on a map right now. It feels like they're giving a lot more than they used to, where they used to combat. I mean, you said it, that they used to like to brawl a lot of the time, and now they just feel like they're very passive, and I feel like they need to be taking better initiative, kind of like what Hawka said. I feel like the fights for map control for them just aren't there right now, and they gave MIBR everything in that round that I showed for nothing. They didn't even make MIBR sweat at all. So I feel like Fnatic really need to rethink some things and maybe just get some confidence back. Just take some fights.
The other 2 teams within the play-ins that I wanted to talk about as you move out of the play-in portion of this tournament is Mousesports and Complexity, right? We'll tie it up into a package because I think they kind of go synonymous with each other in this tournament. Obviously, with Mousesports coming into this, they had obviously got rid of Carrigan. They had just brought in a couple of new players in the form of Acor and now Dexter coming in to be the in-game leader. We don't really know what to expect of that. I mean, they can't have ever played with Dexter, right? He's played in Australia this entire time. They're just going off of what he's done, what they've heard from other players, perhaps, or maybe they like the approach from Renegades. I just want to touch on your thoughts, guys, just too quickly on the roster move. Like, what do you guys feel like Dexter is going to bring to this team? Because from the outside, no one really knows yet. Do you have any idea, Hawka?
I think from what we saw from Dexter at the early tournaments when he played with Renegades, when they actually got to play LANs earlier in the year, they just looked like a solid team, which I think was very impressive just considering the region they came from. So just the fact that I think he can bring that structure in straight away is great. And the other thing you have to consider is obviously they brought Acor in as well. So it's not just one player shifting. They're bringing in an Awping. I think the main thing I would love to see more from Mousesports is Rops was getting really involved in this tournament. I don't know if that's just because he felt like he had to, because they were kind of on short notice, just trying to take fights. But I would honestly love to see Rops do this a bit more, because he was having ridiculous impact against Complexity.
Yeah, he was. And let's take a closer look at Rops as well, because that performance was just incredible from Rops coming up against Complexity. He was tearing them to shreds, Bleh. And Complexity, I mean, they don't make it to the main tournament. One of the only teams within the top couple of the world didn't make it through. And Rops was a big reason as to why that happened.
Yeah, that particular map, it's really hard to to kind of like generalize it overall, because Complexity, let's be real, they kind of choked that, right? They had the lead, they had Mouse ropes on the ropes, it should have been over. Then Rops is like, nah, screw you, I'm just gonna do everything on my own, right? Acor had great moments as well. I think everyone stepped up individually. I don't think it was like crazy calling coming in from Dexter, to be very honest, and Dust2. They did go for some scary plays, but they were just zoned in as one of those maps. For me, Nuke was more of a revelation. Nuke was some incredible calling from Dexter, incredible synergy. So till then, I hadn't seen anything from this Dexter Mousesports, right? It's more like individuals popping off. They had that very close win they had over Renegades, Dexter's old team, in the opening matchup. Complexity almost losing until that final map, right? Rob stepping up and Duster, that's not something which can be sustained. It's not a sustainable thing, even though Rob is a beast. Nuke was fantastic, but also Complexity seemed to be mentally broken after losing Dust 2. So I felt like it was two good things going for Mousesports there. Firstly, great calling coming in from Dexter. Everyone's like zoned in, everyone's feeling it. You had Robs, you had Acor, everyone hitting the shots, and Complexity, who seemed to have mentally just crumbled on that final map. So every good thing I can kind of gauge from Mousesports adding Acor and Dexter seems to go hand in hand with the caveat of a player stepping up, Complexities, the mental breakdown happening on that final map, for example. So I want to see a little bit more from Mouse. It's still very, very early, but at least the fact that they're able to win when it chips it down, I think it's a good sign. It's trending in the right direction for the side of Mouse.
Now, we'll quickly move on from the play-ins to the group stages, and we'll get ourselves into the main meat and potatoes of the show. And when we take a look at the storylines coming out of the groups, there's just so many, right? We had some of the best teams in the world in hockey. Your complaint was there was just too many of the best teams in the world. You couldn't really keep track of all the games going on. And the unfortunate thing is, a lot of the teams we usually expect to head through, okay, maybe we don't catch them on the A stream, but we'll definitely see them later on in the tournament. They didn't make it through. We've seen Vitality just drop off, did not play very well, and I think obviously they've just brought Apex back in, but there's a lot of teams here underperforming, Alex. And we'll talk about Vitality, because honestly, this team were playing so well, and suddenly over the last couple of events have just dropped off. Did you get to catch them in this event much?
Yeah, I think that there's obviously going to be weird stuff going on whenever you have your in-game leader out and then he comes back in. I think over at Blast, we kind of saw just the killer instinct wasn't there in a lot of the calls, and that kind of carried through into this event. I think it looked better, but it still looked like a team that, for me, are still missing their in-game leader at his peak. And when they're a team that's so reliant on that, it's not like Sh1ro is like Simple, where he's going to always be able to sort of take the initiative himself and carry you through. He's much more wanting to work within the system. So if you're not getting that up to speed quickly enough, it's just not going to go as well for you as you would want. I also think coming into this tournament, I think Masuta had some really good tournaments ahead of this, especially towards the end of last year. But I know that he's still at high school, I'm pretty sure, which is crazy to think about. But they said he's still at high school, which is why they're switching in Nevera sometimes. And that is kind of a shame, because I think Masuta wasn't as good this tournament, and I'm still looking for him to really prove he can be a star player, because I've heard so much from these guys. They're saying this guy has really, really good aim, and you do see it sometimes, but it's very, very occasional for me. Like, occasionally I'll see a really nice highlight from Masuta with his aim, and then normally he's kind of just seeming like middle of the pack. So I'm kind of just waiting to see where Masuta develops. I'd love to see, once he becomes maybe more of a star, that's when I really would like to see what Vitality can do.
Now, I'd love to dive more into Vitality, but there's just so much to get through. And obviously, Bleh, you wanted to talk about Sh1ro's underperformance. I think Hawka pretty much summarized that pretty well in terms of how he comes out into the system. He plays very well in the system, but when that system's crumbling, we start to see some of the weaknesses. He still posted a pretty good rating. I think it was 1.11 throughout the tournament, so it's not the worst, but definitely nowhere near the average level of Sh1ro, and he has been struggling with the loss of Apex. But moving on to the roster changes and the teams that have made the roster changes after this event, and that's been Heroic, EG, and OG. Now, obviously, EG's is the most fresh one, with Ethan going to Valorant. I'm going to get your thoughts on this one, Maui, because obviously, North American team, one of the only ones remaining near the top. And man, Ethan was one of the players that was playing really well in this team. This was the biggest shock.
Yeah, this just doesn't... The only bright side I can see from this is that maybe, hopefully, Obo finds a home. Because if I want to if I linger on what's the future of EG right now without Obo, I'm just going to get sad. And I don't want to get any sadder right now, because it is a shame to lose Ethan to Valorant as a CSGO fan. And I mean, I like Valorant. I watch some of the VCT here and there. I see who qualifies for Masters and all of that jazz. But I think at the end of the day, I am always going to be just way more dedicated to CS. I mean, we'll see how the years turn out. But if there are improvements to Valorant, or how it shakes the whole scene up a little bit more. But yeah, it's going to be tough for EG to bounce back from this. I just hope that it doesn't lead to any further disruptions. I really just hope they pick up Obo, they pick up where they left off, and they just start cruising with a new honeymoon, a new revitalized honeymoon period. Because if other people fall off for EG as well, and it's just more Valorant, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry.
I know, it's just one of the only remaining NA teams up there with Liquid, and even Liquid, you know, they're just pulling some Brazilians in there now. You know, this is the last true American team. And Bleh, you were saying in the last show, actually, that you didn't think EG were that bad. You know, people were giving them slack for going out in groups and DreamHack Open. They had all that time off. They played good at Blast, but now this has happened. So clearly, you know, you didn't believe in the team spirit element, but it is not there right now, Bleh, in that team, clearly. And they're going to have to rebuild off of this.
It's kind of unfortunate, right? I still stand by that. I still feel like they were a little unfortunate to lose some of the games they did. I wouldn't say unfortunate. I feel like couple of clutches, couple of close rounds going their way, they could have had more wins than they had. It's a big shocker for me as well. The only bright side I'm going to see here is Ethan, while being one of the better players for them, it's been only when they've been winning. What I mean by that is when they lose, Ethan's nowhere to be found. No matter how close the map is, if they lose that game, Ethan is going to be the kind of missing factor, right? And he has been not as consistent as I would like him to be. When he's popping off, they pretty much win. It's pretty much a guaranteed, at least from the recent results, what I've seen from them. And so I'm going to try and be optimistic. Like Maui said, if they pick up, what was it again? Obo? Yeah, they pick up Obo. They just pick up from where they let off. Hopefully we might see better things, because it would be such a tragedy for them to go to EU, grind it out for all these months, you know, staying away from home and everything, and then they're like, yeah, guys, it's not working out. We're all going to go to Valorant. That would be... I would feel bad for Maui. Jesus, that's painful.
It's like imagine all the best Asian teams just disappear overnight and go to Valorant.
What best Asian teams? What best Asian teams? All the shit teams left for Valorant. I don't care about them. Anyway.
John Olsen, forever in our hearts, Bleh.
Absolute Japan, or absolute zero.
Exactly.
Scars.
Bars. We gotta miss
Tyler's
Bars
still playing.
as well.
Tyler's still playing. VG's still playing. Counterstrike. That's all I care about.
I mean, Tyloo have actually just aren't even beating the best teams in their own region now. So who knows? Maybe they make the move to Valorant. But we take a look at the rest of the roster moves. I'm not going to touch in OG because, you know, they haven't actually announced a replacement player. So I would rather just focus on Heroic here, so we can actually look to the future Hawka. Look at this Heroic team, right? Number one in the world for a stint. They started a little bit of a rivalry on Vertigo against Astralis last year. I don't really want to call it much more than a Vertigo rivalry, but nonetheless, they made some moves. They feel like they've really dropped off, and their time in the sun has come to an end, right? And I do feel like Borup was one of the players who was unfortunately a little inconsistent for me at times. So I kind of understand the move of Borup, but where do you stand on this one, Hawka?
Yeah, I think if you were going to make a move on this team, for me, it would be Borup. And Borup did get the bad spots for this squad, but I still think he did okay. He just never really showed me that he was going to be able to massively step up, right? And I think actually bringing in Shush in Borup's roles could work really well. I think Shush is... I've always liked Shush. Like, I think when he was playing with Hunden, he showed he can do a lot without much space. And so I could see him slotting him really nicely for Borup and just being like a slightly better version all round. He's someone who's not going to take a lot of space on the team. He's a pretty reserved guy in general, so he's happy to play more of those supportive roles. I think that could work. I am a bit surprised with the Nico change out for Refresh. I feel like that's much more of a gamble, because I could see it working. Like, the upside for Refresh is obvious. He looks like he has talent, but we've seen at times, I mean, Maui's going to know, sometimes his decision-making from what we saw at Flashpoint, there were a couple of big mistakes he made. But also, I think Nico was just really reliable on this team whenever I saw them on this Heroic side. I think he did a lot of good work by himself across the map, which I guess Refresh is trying to make himself into that sort of player as well. But Nico is just so solid at it. I don't know if that's a move that I necessarily would have made.
Are you the same, Maui, or do you feel differently about this?
Yeah, I feel like the Shush for Borup one is an upgrade, just flat out. I actually, when I was doing my player tier list back in January, I think I put Borup as like the only player from Heroic that was C tier or lower. I just felt like he was super replaceable for that roster. His headshot percentage was always weirdly high, but I always felt like he never went above and beyond. So I think that is a straight up upgrade. I feel like the Nico though for refresh, it's a little bit more of a lateral move. I'm not really sure if I love it, and unless Heroic are going to change their structure, I'm not sure if refresh is going to fit into the same spots as well or as solidly as Hawka put it as Nico did.
Yeah, it's one of those moves where Nico's actually got all that experience, Bleh, right? He's played in a lot of these top Danish teams. He's followed MSL around and played in a bunch of these Danish teams. He's kind of a journeyman and played in pretty much every Danish roster you can think of. He just has a lot more experience as well in comparison to Refresh. And if you look at Refresh, I mean, he's not really had much time in the sun at all, right? He's had his chance in Cloud9 where he stood in for them. He played well at one of those Blast Pro Series events. He looked good in a couple of teams, but then found himself just at the bottom of the barrel again, just at the bottom of Danish Counterstrike, playing in Copenhagen Flames. How do you feel about this one?
I have to agree with both the Hawka and Maui, right? Like it's a good change when you look at Shush coming in, but at the same time, it's both good and bad. I feel it was very sudden for me personally. I feel like there was something else happening inside of the team. It was very, very sudden, the announcement coming out of nowhere, out of the blue, and all of that. Whoever picks up Nico, they're going to be very happy. Nico is a fantastic addition. He's been around for a very long time. He should be getting picked up immediately, pronto, by any team who'd be looking to upgrade their roster. Yes. And we have Refresh, of course. I don't know. The thing about Refresh as a kid, I've seen this guy play. I've seen him. I've been in events where I think one of his debut events was back in Ukraine. One of those loot, but no, I forgot the name of the event even. But I saw him back then. He was playing with Bubsky in that Fraxis lineup. He has a lot of raw skill. I still don't know why he's never been given the opportunities by some of these, third, fourth, fifth, sixth tier 2 teams in Denmark. For some reason, don't seem to pick him up. I don't know why, but this is a real test and a real opportunity for Refresh, I feel like. And if this kid is ever going to be someone in international Counter-Strike, this would be the opportunity. Personally, I'm pretty excited about this. It's a drastic change. Initially, when I saw it, I was like, why would it do this right now? But then I look at the players that picked up, and considering Caden's going to be at the helm, and he does have this tendency to try and kind of bring out the best from some of these younger players, right? So why the hell not? Fuck it. Let's see what these guys are able to do. Because remember, the Heroic lineup exactly a year ago when they picked up those 2 players, they just went on this upward trajectory, which made them hit #1 in the world, right? Even though it was for a very short period of time. So a year later, maybe a change is what's needed.
Yeah, I for one, I'm glad to see Refresh actually get an opportunity. It's all about getting these young players some chances. Speaking of a player getting a chance, of course, is going to be Junior for Furia. I mean, this player, he's one of those Awpers that was just really popping off in North America, really looking like he was above everyone in a lot of certain matches. But to me, I was kind of skeptical because a couple of games I watched of Triumph, I don't know, I didn't feel like he was quite at the level to be able to perform with Furia. But damn, he came into this tournament and Junior was actually looking really solid. And I want to start with Hawka, just your thoughts on Junior as a player so far.
I mean, it's really cool in general seeing Furia say, you know what, we're willing to commit to this, and we're willing to say, hey, we're gonna go ahead and switch to English. We want to be an international team now, and yeah, for a first event for Junior, like you can't really complain. He took that primary Awping role for the squad. I mean, you look at just his AWP kills per round in general. He did solid. He did what you needed him to do. He wasn't top of the charts or anything. No. He wasn't killing it. But for a debut, for an AWPer especially, we always talk about how it can be really hard for AWPers at times to adapt to the top level. I think it was a solid enough debut for Junior. And I think the nice thing is, whenever you're playing on a team with Art, we're obviously just going to see Art take a lot of aggressive AWP spots. Sometimes he's just going to bust it out. So we talked about how Henny always got much more of an ability to just play within his comfort zone because Art can do a lot of aggressive things. It makes it maybe easier for Henny to just hold on other sides of the map and just do a solid job. And I think Junior can develop into that, hopefully, because I really hope he does, because like we want to see Furia back at the top. And the fact that Henny just suddenly left this team, it's a shame. But if Junior can fill those boots, yeah, I'm excited for it, because it opens up even more options for Furia going forwards as well. If they're going to go international, that could be really cool.
Yeah, and the weird thing is they really seem to be going nowhere with that other team as well, with the whole XMIBR team. So yeah, it's not really looking like the best of moves, but Junior will certainly be loving this opportunity. We've actually got a Furia round to take a look at here, and I think it's Bleh, you've got this one prepared for us. You know, we looked at Furia versus Navi, and this was actually one we were looking at because Junior gave an interview to HLTV saying his work ethic, you know, if Simple has a certain amount of hours, he's going to have more. Can't remember the exact quote, but nonetheless, he shows a pretty good attitude, and we're going to take a closer look at a round from Furia versus Navi.
Yeah, this is a pretty simple round in all honesty. It's me basically trying to, you know how Twitch chat and Reddit and whatnot are like, oh, Furia is just aggression, they just get in your face. This is a round which highlights sometimes how they slow things down and how it works out so wonderfully for them, right? So round number 10 here on Mirage T side, all right? Let's see what Furia does. Just put the camera towards mid just to showcase the smokes. Standard cross smoke we have over here, and then we have just going to pause it for a second, switch over. Yeah, there we go. So I had a smoke over here for Art to jump across. Art, as usual, leading the way. We have the set smoke all the way from spawn as well. So 2 smokes blooming over here, and the smoke for and a smoke for jungle as well. So they're utilizing all their smokes very early on. And look at the pace being set by Art as usual. Now you have Simple waiting. Okay, I'm just going to pause it for a sec. Oh, Anna's going to hate me for making Skybox look so ugly, but all right. So here we go. So Simple towards the ladder room, and he's going to come running across. A little bit of mistake from Art not checking towards the ladder room, but he gets taken down. The trade is immediate. The spacing is fantastic coming in from Furia, right? Now, it's a 4v4. I'm just going to switch over to the mid look again. Where do we got the A side? And there is mid. There we go. Now, they're going to slow things down a bit. And we have 3 players. That is, we have Vinny, we have Yuri, and we have Junior all the way towards ladder room. And I'm going to just go pause for a sec. And I'm just going to show this setup. Let's see if I can get this right. There we go. Put the glass mode to make it look really cool as well.
Damn.
Now you can see Sh1ro all the way towards apartments, right? His job is to deploy smoke and just keep the B defenders busy. Now that is Flamey and Perfecto. Vinny's going to be making sure no one comes up from window and, you know, creeps on above. We have Junior waiting patiently. He's going to be boosting up Yuri. Yuri's going to be spotting for any push from towards Cat. And now Navi, minute and 11 seconds on the clock. They don't really have any information like what's going on. They need to go for a play here, and that's what Furia are looking to punish. Junior just trained here, waiting for anyone to cross on over, and boomage, boom, dead. That's a kill. And now I'm going to be switching over quickly to the overview. There we go. And now Furia have the opening. They have the man advantage. What did it do with this? 50 seconds. They still have a lot of time to work with. It's slowly going to be creeping up towards connector. You still have the player over here that is Flamey is going to be waiting patiently for any potential play towards B because he was aware Sh1ro was towards the B apartments early on. They're wasting no time here. They're going for a faster play. They could have taken the time, I feel like, over here. Still a lot of time remaining, 35 seconds, but they speed things up. That's an opportunity for Electronic to peek on around the corner. He could have got a double kill, but he just finds one. But now it's 3v3. They've neutralized the man advantage. Molotov going to be deployed here by Junior with the AWP. He's going to find himself a more comfortable position with the AWP, which is a smart play, but then he's going to get peeked. And this is a great play from Navi. 3v3, they push on in together, but then this play by Yuri. Yuri gets the opening, Yuri gets the kill here in 3v2, and then, of course, Vinny comes in to save him. They go for the aggro play. They don't wait for the bomb to get planted, but then patience coming in from Furia, and then they win out the 1v2 at the end over there. So yeah, that's how the round played out. But I just want to show like these small little micro decisions being made by Furia on the fly, I feel like, and like how they slowed things down, how they forced Navi to go for info plays, dry info plays, which is why Navi got punished. In the end, yeah, Furia lost out the game. They lost that map, but they lost that game as well to Navi. But just these small little micro plays and decisions being made by Furia, despite the fact they switched over to a whole different language in game with Junior coming on in, I think that paints a great picture for this team going forward.
Yeah, that is definitely something that was a talking point throughout this event, was where is the sort of communication out due to the language change for Furia. I think Vinny was saying it was actually pretty good right now for Furia. They don't really feel too many issues coming into this. But, you know, the thing about Furia, Alex, that definitely was a worry for me was the fact that this team, you know, they look like they've got this crazy aggression. They look like they go for some of these brain dead plays, but they're all calculated. They know exactly what they're doing, right? They have loads of protocols when it comes to it. We see some underpass aggression. There's someone in a right spot throwing the right piece of utility at the right time. Now, all of this obviously takes quite a lot of practice and communication. That didn't really seem to be an issue for Furia. Do you feel like they're just playing off of what they've got with the rest of the guys already put in together? You know, the practice hours already there. Do you feel like it'll become a problem in the future when they have to adapt and continue to improve their game style?
I think because they're bringing in Junior, I think if anything, bringing in him as the alt role actually kind of helps them in a sense, because I don't think Henny was ever as involved in a lot of those opening fights. I mean, you look at the stats for this tournament, Junior had the lowest deaths per round on the team, other than Sh1ro, who's another one of those more passive players. But it's not like Junior's going to have to come in and do too much in general, I think, to facilitate the plays. Normally, it feels like he's just going to have to like hold an angle. You kind of saw in that round, right? He's just kind of holding into connector while they're trying to draw some rotations away. So I think the nice thing about that is he can probably slot into the team a little more easily than if he was having to get aggressive all the time. I also think, just quickly, we were talking about your Kindar's aggression earlier. Yeah, I guess a nice parallel to that would be Art, who's already proven you can do that on LAN if those plays are thought through, and clearly Furia do think those plays through.
That's something I'm very excited about, is like Furia on LAN again. I think the biggest thing that I'm impressed by, Maui, is the fact that Furia got figured out, right? They definitely did. We knew it was all going to come. When they were starting to really climb up the ladder at ECS and they beat Astralis, they made it to the final, they looked like a really solid force there. We knew they had that wild aggression that we didn't know if it was going to be sustainable. A lot of us just thought it would get figured out and then that would be Furia dead. And when they made that 5-year contract with Nike, or signed the 5-year deal or whatever to the org, everybody was sort of going, why? Because we expected this team to fall off, but they've went through that rough time where they did fall off. They were figured out, but they've come back and they've actually been able to get back to a relevant stage. And that's the most impressive thing about this team.
Yeah, I think that they've developed a lot more depth overall. I think that they, like Bleh showed in that example, they can slow a lot of rounds down and play out the 3v3s, 4v4s in a way that just isn't all in on the opening pick, because that was definitely their flaw before. It was also their strength before, but the fact is that, I mean, jumping through a smoke on Arch side, Inferno, like 4 rounds out of a whole T side is not going to work more than maybe once if they know that that's something that you do. So it's nice to see that they've actually expanded their game and developed kind of that more, I'd say, consistent style on top of it. And I also think just the individuals on top of that have really excelled. The fact that they, who did they take out? Able J, and then they added in a player. Oh God, I forgot who it was for who now. But overall,
another Brazilian.
I think it was another Brazilian. Yeah, no, it was Henny. It was Henny. Yeah, it was Able J for Henny.
Oh, right,
that's
right,
what it was. And that just upped their consistency so much. And overall, I think that Junior, I'm just glad to see him bounce back, because, or just to be on his feet on a team or that really we all had some questions about, but he's actually playing pretty well. And one thing about Junior that I can't let go, that Junior's actual worst HLTV performance of all time is when he played with me in a close qualifier against Cadian's rogue team, and I'm just glad that he's never going to have that performance again. I just know it for a fact. 0.19 rating. Junior had 2 kills in that game, and I think
it's all your
he's
fault,
found a
Maui.
great home now. Yeah,
It's all Maui's fault. It's all
Wait, so did you out-frag him in that game, Maui?
Yes, I had twice his frags with 4.
Oh, massive.
We got one round. We got one round against them.
Ow.
It was on train. And we started T side. I don't even know. Like, it was just a pug too. Didn't even make any sense.
Well, lucky for you viewers, we actually have a Skybox segment, and all of Maui's kills, they'll be coming right up. But no, yeah, I mean, it's good to see Junior here. I mean, he's a player that I was really worried about maybe having to go to Valorant or something, because a player of that caliber, of that skill, he doesn't really deserve to be hanging around getting paid nothing really to play in North American tournaments. It's just not really where he deserves to be. So I'm glad he's found a spot in Furia. In that way, the move for Henny is actually a good move. You know, he's actually given a player a chance. But we'll see where Henny ends up. That team still looks pretty good. But we'll move on from Furia now. We'll get into more of the teams within this. And there was so much action in the group stages that I barely got to see G2 play. You kind of forget some of these teams were even in this tournament at times. But G2 are the team that we've kind of all addressed as being a little bit underwhelming sometimes and really haven't been able to step up to where they should be. We've got a round on Skybox here where you want to show us, Hawka, of Amanek just doing Amanek things.
Yeah, okay, don't get too excited about the strategy of this one or anything, because I was watching through G2. We'll get into this clip quickly. This is round 30 of their game against EG. We're going to see the smokes go up towards long. So if we just take a look here, this is the T side smoke, which they throw for the corner. If I can draw, why can't I draw? There we go. There's the T side smoke on the corner. CT's counter with the smoke of their own. This is very common nowadays, and you get this kind of wall made so that they can just cross all the way through into pit, and there's nothing that Amanek can do from the other line of sight. Let me go ahead and erase that, because that is a mess.
What are you
that I've
drawing
just
here?
drawn.
What are you drawing
Look,
here,
it's abstract art, Dinko. Counter-Strike is art, okay?
We don't want to get banned on Twitch here. Come on, keep it PG.
Yeah, but we're going to see EG get themselves into pit. Amanek here is alone. Amanek here is alone on the lurk, I guess you could call it, the pressure lurk. We're going to switch to his POV because he's about to drop a flash through this smoke. And, okay, there is also a Molotov down here, which is something we have to take note of. I think that helps kind of mask the sound of him dropping this flashbang a bit. And he just goes through, blinds both these players. He gets the 2 kills. And then from this point, if we go ahead and take a look at the overview, we're going to see that the rest of G2 are all just barreling up mid. They're going to go ahead and just close out this round, just basically using trades. Amanek doesn't even die for a long time here. He gets all the way up long, and Breeze is just not able to deal with him. But overall, when watching these games from G2, I mean, you look at this, for example, on Dust 2, that round's cool and everything, but you're relying on Amanek to get those 2 kills. You're relying a lot on basic stuff. I almost felt like while watching G2, they were kind of trying to play a somewhat similar game to Spirit, where it's just more reliant on fundamentals and stuff like that than anything else. But a lot of the time, the spacing and the trades weren't there. And they're also, for example, picking Dust 2 a lot, which is a map that you can't really come up with loads of new stuff on. You can't really out-tactic your opponents at times. And I don't know, if they can get those fundamentals down, I think it could work because they have so much skill. But it still looked like at times things were just off and they weren't always on the same page, which they need to fix.
The worrying thing is, Bleh, it's not like they haven't had time to fix basic fundamentals, right? They've had a lot of time now with this team. You know, we usually say, okay, maybe the first tournament they can look shaky. The second tournament, you know, if they improve slightly, that's okay. But now they've just had so much time, and they're still messing up some fundamentals. They're still relying on Amanek pushing and doing ridiculous things through smokes you just should never be seeing. I was trying to find the right word there without really throwing myself under the bus. But nonetheless, Bleh, you know, looking at this G2 team, what are your honest opinions of this? Do we think Nexa, as an in-game leader, I'm going to point this, I don't know where I'm going to go with this, but I am going to start by just giving you the question. Is Nexa a great in-game leader? Because he's had so much time, right, with this team, and where have they really gone?
Wow.
You know, they have a lot of problems coming through still. So maybe that's what I'm reading into a little bit.
Is he a great in-game leader? No, I don't think he's a great in-game leader. Is he a solid in-game leader? Yes, I do believe he is. Like, I've seen things from G2, which I look at, I'm like, damn, you know, this is some pretty solid stuff. You look at the individuals, you have the Kovac brothers. Kenny S, he's actually hitting his shots. The last few events I've seen from Kenny S, he's actually been looking more and more like the older Kenny S we've seen of old, although not at close to that level, the peak he used to hit with the French teams earlier, right? And then you have Amanek, in my opinion, the most underrated player in the team. Really, really, really good player. I would love to have him in any team if I had to make a star-studded lineup or something. So individuals aren't a problem. You have individuals to have it in spades. I think it's I feel like they need a mental coach. I know I might be stretching here, but I feel like sometimes when things don't go their way, unlike a lot of other tier 1 teams, I look at their, I wouldn't say body language, but the way they approach the game when things are really going their way. And to me, it looks like a tier 2 team who's struggling against, like, let's say an Astralis or like an EG or whatever, right? And I feel like it's a mentality thing. I feel like emotions could be running high. I don't know what how it is inside the team and the comms and everything. But for me, that seems to be something which is jumping out to me, because outside of that, I'm like, why aren't you doing the same thing you did in the very same map against an opponent of a similar caliber, or even better than what you're doing playing against right now? You should be winning rounds or maps like this, and they don't do the same thing. They just seem to kind of, I wouldn't say stop trying, I think that's the wrong phrase to use, but they seem to kind of like draw a blank where I'm like, you shouldn't be drawing a blank. You have been in scenarios like this, in situations like this, in teams like this, and you're just not doing the same thing you did earlier. So I don't get it. Maybe a mental coach.
I mean, they do look quite tilted sometimes, right? They're very emotional, and I think that's been there for a very long time, actually. You know, even with the addition of Nico, it didn't really. I think they were fired up for a little bit, but when you look at the team cams, even Malik, right? He's just sitting there, and Maniac was actually saying, you know, he knows the Malik very well. He was saying like, if he can't figure out how to get these guys in a better mind frame, if even he can't find the answers, you know, G2 are definitely in a weird spot. Do you feel like Maui, it's because they're in such a weird place right now? You know, they were struggling before they brought Nico in. Hunter did start to drop off, but now you've changed up those roles as well. You've got Kenny S, who sometimes is definitely not exactly hitting the shots he should be, can be inconsistent sometimes. You've got Nico, who's just, he's a black hole of just being such a good player that he's going to suck in all of the good spots. He's going to take so much resources from the team. Obviously, that's going to put Hunter in a weird place. Nexa and Amanek, you know, they're just going to take what's left. Do you think it's just going to be, although we want to see it a little bit quicker, do you think it's still going to be a bit of time before they actually crack the code and, okay, this is how we need to play?
I think Bleh put it pretty well, that I think it's kind of a mental thing, actually, because I mean, like, Nico didn't take all of Hunter's spots. He still gets to play a lot of his roles, and I think that it's just difficult, I think, if you're a team like G2, where you saw a lot of success last year because you were very anti-strat heavy, you had a lot of set plays, you knew what to do, you had so much great prep work, and now I feel like they're trying to play a style that is a little bit more conducive to what Nico wants, just a little bit. Not that he's taking anyone's spots away, but they kind of have a new game plan moving into like all of their matches, which I don't think is comfortable for everybody else. I think everybody else and is not is sure is kind of like a more default heavy style. I think Nexa, maybe he's not a great IGL, but there was a period last year where he looked very good, and I think it was more based off of just kind of counter strat plays, set utility that they knew was going to be coming out of spawn, and he knew what to call out of spawn very well. I think their T sides were actually really impressive, probably around, if I'm not mistaken, February through April of last year. I think that's when they kind of had their little hot streak. That looked really well polished, but now they're trying to play a different type of game, probably to make Nico feel a little bit better, and probably because there's a little bit of a clashing of ideas in the team right now. I think they just need to settle on one game plan, and they need to just stick with it, even through the hardship that they're going through.
Yeah, I think within history of Counter-Strike, there is actually a lot of discussion of different styles of IGLing, right? People talk about the stylistic style of calling, and some people are very good at one aspect of calling, and maybe when things get rough, they have to change up that game plan. It can be a learning curve, because, I mean, people don't really realize this, and maybe it's not talked about enough. Nexa didn't really play at the top levels of Counter-Strike at all, really. You know, his first big teams is obviously G2, played in Crazy for a long time. So a lot of these players still have a lot of development to go, still a lot of time learning new things, and hopefully we'll get to see G2 start to really bring something to the table in the next few tournaments, because, you know, this team should be near the top at a lot of them. But let's move on to a team that is no stranger to winning trophies. Of course, it is Astralis, and they got absolutely bitch slapped by Spirit 16-1 on Dust 2 Blood. And you want to take us through this one, because, I mean, how could you not? There's just so much to look at here.
Yeah, this is, of course, the legendary 16-1 map. They came so very close to getting the 16-0. Unfortunately, they couldn't pull it off. But okay, let's take a look at this, right? So it's 0-9, and Astralis having struggling getting this long control. They just been getting bullied time and time again by Spirit, and for the very first time, I believe, in the entirety of this game so far, they managed to kind of take it, because Magix and Chopper, they don't opt to fight, because multiple times when you see the smoke, they actually, you know, push on in. We see, I think it's Magix pushing towards Pit with flashes coming from Chopper, which enables him to, you know, get a couple of kills, stay alive there, and Astralis is just getting completely dumpstered towards this long area. So the very first time in a long time, they managed to get control of long. Now, what do these guys do? What do our dear CIS team do? Let me take a look at the overview. There we go. I'm just going to go back a little bit here because I missed that out. They aggress short, right? They leave Magix towards A over here. They have a player that is Mir, who is usually their point man, pushing towards mid, and then he has everyone else gathering up together here. And in the meantime, Astralis slowly creeping on up. They're still wary of the fact that there could be a player from Astralis towards the B apartments area. And as we have some Die Young slowly leaving B and holding this cross for Astralis pushing towards A bomb side, you have these two players pushing up towards tunnels because they still don't have the information. It's not an ideal information play coming from Spirit yet. But the moment the play takes place from Astralis, that is going to be the moment that the two players pushing towards tunnels here, they immediately turn around, right? The play comes in, and now I want to show you how Spirit give Astralis a taste of their own medicine with the utility usage. And my oh my, it must have sucked to be Astralis at that point in time. All right, let's see this. All right, they're going to be going for the hit here. Going to go back a bit. Now, take a look at the utility they have. Team Spirit, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nades and four incendiaries, right? And the moment the cross takes place, you see the flashes popping from Astralis. You see them deploying the smokes. Magix is waiting over here on the A bomb side, right next to the side. Basically, they have some Die Young, Dexter. They have the nades out, and they toss in the nades, and Zipix gets completely fucked, right? 3 nades, and he's taken down. That's completely destroyed, and they don't even see that. And it's so cool to see someone doing Astralis. It's not like I hate Astralis, but it's so cool to see someone else doing Astralis.
Yeah, check that, Zipix.
See, that's how it feels like. That's how it feels like Astralis. Now, take a look at Dupree, right? Dupree's over here. Oh, why can't I draw? Yeah, there we go. Dupree's over here. There's a flames running right behind him. And he's blinded. He falls back. He doesn't even know he's burning, and he dies in utility as well, which sucks. Now it's a 4v3. At least it takes on Magix, who gets taken down over here. Now, this is a misplay from Dexter, in my opinion. There's no need for him to go for this play. They haven't planted the bomb yet. It's a 4v3. Your teammates are coming in from short. They still can't make a move because there's a Molotov towards Cat, and Dexter pushes in. And Glaive punishes him for that, right? It's a 3v3 right now. And this is where, if you're Spirit, you kind of take it slow. But I love how proactive they are because they still have a Molotov and a nade and a flashbang, right? Glaive, he waits for any push to come on in. They use the nade. Molotov follows up. Glaive will be pushed out from his position. He has to head on back over here. And Sumda Young, he jiggle peeks. He jiggle peeks over here. I'm going to switch to his POV. Wow, just a quick second. There we go. So sometimes he's going to jiggle peek and bait out a shot from Device. The moment the shot rings out from Device, that's when Sumda Young is going to be taking out his AWP and is going to win this deal. Just goes for the wide swing, great shot from him. And then in the meantime, his teammates are also going to be Glaive's going to be taken down as well. And in the end, it's only Magix left. There's nothing he can do, and it is going to be Sumda Young. The jumping shot, of course, with the Tech 9 to finish things off. But just the way they completely outplayed Astralis and made them feel so very uncomfortable, it was so great to watch, right? Because Spirit is not a team you think of when it comes to great utility damage compared to, let's say, VP or Gambit, their CIS counterparts. You think of them as just popping off, just going for aggro plays all the time. No, there was a method behind the madness. It was simple Counterstrike. It was great spacing. It was going for info plays. And again, great utility usage being done there. And for me, the fact that it was against Astralis made it even more better.
Well, Hawka, looking at Team Spirit, anything that jumped out for you in this match? I mean, obviously 16-1, but you can look at the rest of the series. Just like kind of your opinions on Spirit as a roster in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they've come through so quickly and impressed so much with Dexter on the lineup is crazy. We also have to quickly talk about the fact that the whole 6-man roster thing has not come through in this tournament, which I'm not surprised by. I think Patsy could probably fill in for Magix, would be the obvious one, and then most of the other players I wouldn't see him filling in for. But overall, yeah, in general, Dexter obviously brings, I think, something different to this team where he has that ability to play more just based off of the positioning, which we've talked about. I mean, stats-wise, this wasn't even that impressive of a tournament for Dexter, which is why I'm kind of excited for the future. Like, he was 4th highest rated on the team, I believe. So I honestly think there's more room for growth there, potentially. And just in general, I mean, Mir on this team is amazing. He's been just consistently so good for them on those entries. And that is something that it feels like these CIS teams that are up and coming have a lot of. They have a lot of these players who are very good at just taking early fights. And obviously, for the longest time, it felt to me like Spirit were mainly just reliant upon making sure they set up Mir, because if you have an aggressive rifler who's good, he's going to provide so much value for you. And it's just really cool to see them coming through and making everything work here in Katowice. Like, obviously, they didn't end up going as far as we might have wanted after that win against Astralis, but still, I think overall, the way I describe Spirit is they're a very skilled team who just do enough in terms of team play and tactics. I wouldn't say that's their strength, but they do a good enough job in those aspects to make sure that they can compete. And then if they're having a good day individually with the skill on this roster, yeah, they can do that to you. They can do that to Astralis.
So, Maui, when we look at what Hawka's just said, I want to kind of leapfrog off that and talk about how sustainable this is. Because, you know, you look at Team Spirit, okay, they've come out of the gate swinging with Dexter added to the team. They tried to have that experiment where they brought in Patsy, they switched out Chopper for some maps, which to me actually just shows how little they care about tactics. When you were able to just literally switch out your IGL and put in some random player that's never played with your team. I mean, come on, like, what is that? I don't get it. But when you look at the sustainability of this, do you feel like Team Spirit are going to be able to keep up this level of performance, or do you feel like they're going to have to go deeper, just like Furia did years ago? Because when you look at it, it's just not going to be something you can keep up forever.
Yeah, it's longevity is always a tricky question for me when I think about any team, because do I think the style that they play right now will always work? The answer would be definitely no, because I think that Mirror is so good at being an aggressive rifler with very little utility support. Like, he can take Banana by himself with just his own nade set, and he can do it against the best teams in the world, and I feel like that shouldn't always work in the future, but I mean, for now it is, and so that's, I like to just see Counter-Strike in the moment, maybe look a few months ahead at a time, but it's very difficult for me to say whether or not longevity is in the cards for the Spirit lineup, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's just up to Mirror. It's up to how much work is he going to be putting in. Is he going to look at all the demos for the teams in the utility procedures they have for every position that he plays against? Because if he does, yeah, they can keep this up forever, but if he doesn't, then he's going to get caught slipping, and if his rating drops, you know, just like 20%, this team does fall apart.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Mirror is such an incredible player at what he does, and you see that. But a player that's very capable of doing that as well, and some pundits of the game and some professional players, MBK, have been saying, is Yakindar is built different, right? He's just a player that comes in, he can do that, but he can also do so many other things others can't. And that's exactly what we're going to be taking a look at now, Maui, because we're going to move on to Virtus Pro. And once again, it's Astralis getting banged on by a CIS team. So take us through this one, Maui.
Yeah, so what we should be seeing here, actually, wait, is this one set up properly right now, or do I need to? I think we're good. I think we're good. Okay. So what we're going to be seeing here in this round is just the way that VP can do so much at the same time. And the way I really want to preface this whole thing is that Astralis is a team that likes to see one thing and react to that thing with a set play to get back into the round. And what VP do, what I feel like is the modern meta of Counter-Strike, is they just do so much at the same time. And it feels a little bit random, but it's actually just this well thought out picture that VP has drilled over and over again. So the way that this round is going to actually begin is with Buster looking for some contact here towards long. And what VP's reaction is from this situation is where I find them most impressive. So Buster, he actually just straight up dies to Dupree in this situation right over here. And then if we just move into what's going on at the B site, I want you guys to actually look, and what Skybox brings in this situation is the fact that we can see the reaction from Astralis. Device is actually making his way with Dupree to actually join up towards bathrooms, and that is their reaction in this situation. And VP kind of seems to know that. The way that Yakinder responded to Yanko's question on the desk about why he does some of the aggressive plays that he does at the same time, it's all just this picture of, okay, we know that Astralis are probably going to just be sending some more pressure towards bathrooms right now, so we think that B is vulnerable in this state at this point in time, and they just pounce. There's very little utility to back this up. Sanji kind of swings from connector, Kickert's just spamming through the wall right here, Yakinder's pushing at the same time. It's so much sheer aggression, and we don't have to even look at Skybox anymore because they just swarm the bomb site, they take it over. Everything is just clear cut at that point. And I think where old teams in 2013, 2014 did, they saw the game as just like this super slow turn-based strategy, and it was very kind of boring to watch, and it was just like, okay, one thing happens, now we have to set up this next play 10 seconds later. And Astralis still kind of has that mentality that they want to do one thing and react with another thing, but VP, they see one thing and they're just doing two things to counter that one reaction at the same time. It's just such a beautiful blend of just responses constantly coming from this team that's supported by the fact that their individual ability is so high.
Yeah, VP for all of us, I'm sure, is one of our favorite teams to watch right now. They just bring a whole different approach to Counter-Strike, and we've really been loving it. I think this team, for me, actually, Hawka, we talked about this, you and I, a couple of times, is, we looked at VP before, and before they added Yukindo, and sometimes they could be a little bit stale, right? But sometimes they just lack that flair. It seems like now they have so many different facets to the game.
Yeah, for sure. I think we obviously talk about Adren on that old roster. Kind of he was doing what he could, but he wasn't filling the roles that Yekindar does, right? And having so many players on this team that just have the ability to open up rounds by themselves. Like you have Yekindar, then you have Buster getting entries on the follow-up. You have so much on this team. Kicker is really good at making heads-up plays, but obviously a lot of it is predicated upon Yekindar to begin with. And I think, especially in the grand final, even on Vertigo, for example, like I pointed out, that's a map where if you have an aggressive rifler doing a lot early, that's one of the maps that you can get most value from, right? And that's probably a map I felt like they shouldn't have won, but just because Yekindar was able to pressure a lot of the times, he kind of got them back into that game. So it's great to see that he is able to get away with so many of his plays. It's great to see it working against Astralis as well, because I actually remember when watching that Overpass game specifically, I was waiting for the adaptation for Astralis, the switch up over on B. I was kind of waiting for maybe Device to go down there at some point, but it never happened. It kind of feels like at times Astralis have this idea about how they want to play the game, and sometimes they're a little slow to adapt. They felt like they should be holding that B site, but I would have liked to have seen something switch up sooner, and VP just kind of kept abusing that B site.
Yeah, it felt like Astralis really got found out by the CIS teams in this tournament. Device is having some frustrating post-match interviews. Fair play to him for actually coming on as well. And a lot of those, he was talking about how the individual level is just so high in Counter-Strike right now. And Astralis maybe feel like they fall behind a little bit on that sometimes. And they are a team that live and die by the preparation and not just having that raw ability and sending yourself in. I want to hear your thoughts on this, Bleh, very quickly as we wrap up on VP.
Yeah, I feel like it pretty much typifies what we spoke about earlier. Like, what is CIS Counterstrike? Like, what does this phrase really mean, right? And I feel like it's about utilizing everything you have at hand. You have the tactical ability, you have the homework you've done in your opponents. At the same time, you have the individuals, and you need to learn how to mix and match it depending on the scenario. And I feel that's something that the CIS teams did fantastically so far this tournament, while other teams did kind of fall off. We talk about G2, talk about Fnatic, for example, how passive they were to CT side. You have the individuals, for crying out loud. You have JW, you have this Jackinho, this new kid on the block as well. You have players like Crims. Why are you afraid to take fights, right? Like, but if you look at teams like VP or Gambit for that matter, these are the guys who are like, all right, Nafani, you're feeling it. Let's go for this fight. Let's go for the team mid control towards Train. Let's go for the pop lock control. They're not going to be waiting for the opponents to come on in. And excuse me, if that doesn't pan out, then they have the default setups, right? Then they know how to adapt to the situation. And I feel that's something, adaptability. I think that is what I would put as CIS Counterstrike. And I think that's what these teams are exemplifying.
And I've just noticed, actually, you have a round here as well, VP versus Astralis. Bleh, I think that'll just wrap us up pretty much on the Astralis downfall portion of this and how VP were able to take them down. It's from round 10 on Overpass.
Yeah, and it almost feels like we're bullying Astralis at this point. But the reason we bring in Astralis is because they are one of my favorite teams. One of my favorite teams to watch, right? They are a really, really fundamentally sound team. But they've been made to look average. Mediocre, actually. So just to paint a picture, same game, same map, which Maui highlighted. I think it was round number 5 or 6, where they went for the B hit eventually. Now it's 7-7-2, right? And VP have gone the B bomb side 8 times out of 9, which is ridiculous. So this is a classic case of conditioning. Conditioning, for those of you who might have heard, people, analysts and color commentators mentioning, is when the opponents have conditioned your team has kind of gone for a particular play multiple times to a point where your opponents are starting to feel paranoid. They're like, oh shit, they're going to be going B again. And that's exactly what's going to be happening here as we take a quick free look. Initial duel towards Monster, right? It's a 4v4. And look at the time. It's 1 minute and 25 seconds on the clock. We still have 3 players over here. And you can see Astralis go for a B hit early on. We have Dupree, you have Glaive, and I do believe that is that Magisk? Yeah, I think it's Magisk. 3 players over here. And switching over to the overview, VP, now they mix things up. They've been hitting B multiple times, and they've been hitting it at different times. Fast B hits, a minute on the clock, 50 seconds, 40 seconds, even 30 seconds. So they've mixed it up multiple times to a point where Astralis don't feel comfortable just leaving B. And that's when they go for kind of a gamblish stack where they keep 3 players over here. I'm going to be showing their setup very quickly, and they stick with the setup for pretty much throughout. They have a player watching cat. They have a glaive here with the smoke, which will be deployed the moment the hit comes on in. Kicker is the usual B lurk. He's going to be waiting patiently over here, and he's going to be helped out by Jame. Jame's got the bomb. All right. They have 2 players walking up towards A bomb site, where it's only on Dupree. And give me a sec here. There we go. I'm just going to go back a second. The hit comes on in from Kicker, helped out by Jame, and they make it look very convincing. The flash is going to be popping off towards this B bomb site over here, and you can see Kicker make a play. The smoke's going to be deployed by Glaive, and they have to. There we go. The smoke being deployed by Glaive over here, and Kicker sells it so well. Bullets being rattled off. In the meantime, look at the A bomb site. They're going to be going for the contact play towards A. Dupree. He finds one. That's all he'll find as it gets quickly traded, and that's a call for the rotation. But the rotation is a little too late, I feel like. And I'm just going to be switching very quickly towards the A bomb site. There you have it. And Kicker's still sticking around towards connector, waiting for a 1 CT to come on in, but all 3 CTs come in from bank. But Bus is already waiting here. He's going to find device. And now it's a 2v3. James have got the angle. Kicker's going to be making his way all the way from connected towards bathrooms. Round's pretty much done. They might get a kill here. They might get a couple of kills, which is exactly what happens. Actually, I think it comes down to a 1v1 because Jame overcommits on that fight. But in the end, what a round from VP, right? That was a perfect mid-round call. It was a 4v4 that conditioned Astralis to have multiple players towards B. They faked that B bomb side, went for the contact play towards A. The timing was pristine. Just fantastic work overall coming in from the side of VP. And again, like I said, this is how they were forcing teams like Astralis, all the favorites like the EU teams, for example, to play a react. They were forcing them to play reactive, which was spectacular. It wasn't YOLO plays. It wasn't just them outgunning everyone. It was thought out, tactical Counterstrike.
I'm glad we can get into this because we can look at every CIS team, and we're going to move on to the next one because this really is answering the question not only with words but also showing you visually how different these two teams all play. And we're going to move on to the team that actually won Katowice 2021, and that of course was Gambit. Now, this team, I mean, they're a team that have literally just had a bunch of young kids coming out of nowhere. They've been grinding hundreds and hundreds of online matches every single year, playing in the worst tournaments possible as a tier 2 or 3 player. And now they find themselves here winning Katowice. Now, it just shows their grind has really paid off. And they don't really get the respect they deserve sometimes in terms of how they approach the game. Hawka, you've got a Skybox here ready for us to take a look at Gambit's performance. And then we're going to get into really talking about Gambit and what we think of them as a team.
Yeah, this one's going to be on Train when they went up against Navi. I know Maui later might be waxing lyrical about their Train play as well, but I just wanted to show one CT round that they played where I just think they did a great job in general. There is a lot to talk about in this round. We're going to start on the overview, looking at this A side of the map. You're going to see some pretty standard smokes from Navi to begin with. They're going to put one smoke down here. The other smoke lands towards E-Box. That's to try and take away information and maybe get some players pushed out into these positions to try and pressure this A bomb site. But you can kind of already see that Gambit aren't too worried about this. They've already got Nafany pushed up in Pop Dog. They've already got Axar with eyes on A main. So he's not as worried, especially because Inters has been hanging around and just having a look occasionally back towards A. So he knows that there's not too much in terms of early pressure. And now you're going to start to see as this round plays out, Axel's just constantly having a look at A main, right? He's got this line of sight here. He's making sure no one kind of lurks out through this position. And eventually, as we start to see this round play out, he's even going to get a little aggressive, just having a slight look in towards T-Con. If we pause here, over towards Ivy, you can notice that Electronic has now used a third smoke to try and again pressure this A bomb site. So that's kind of why it's nice having Axile now aggressive towards A main, because even though this smoke is meant to maybe feel like it's going to pressure Gambit, Axile's looking at A main. He's not really that worried right here about this A site. Inters is just going to rotate back to cover off the back side. And at this point, There's been 3 smokes used on A, and Gambit feel pretty comfortable. They haven't seen too much in terms of players at T-Con. They haven't seen too much in terms of players in Pop Dog, where Nafany's been pushed in. So they're just going to go ahead and molly Ivy in case there's a push in this position, and they're going to rotate Nafany down to this B site preemptively because they just don't believe it's an A play with the little information they've got right now. So this is a nice way of hedging their bets, making sure they don't get caught over at Ivy. They're instead going to focus both players on this position in case the push was going to come in. And now if we go ahead and switch over to the overview, we can go look at the B site where they do a really good job once this push comes in at just staying alive and making it so annoying for Navi. So you can see Sh1ro's got that line of sight into upper to begin with. Nades are coming in, and there goes the molly, slowing them down already. Flash comes in, Sh1ro's going to peek behind it. Doesn't get a kill to begin with, but as we see the push coming out through upper for Navi, just look at all these angles they're having to deal with. At this point, the last 2 smokes have been used at B, so Gambit are really confident now this is a B play. They can count those smokes. They know that the last 2 smokes Navi have used are on this B site, so they now have all these angles looking at just one position, right? Inters is going to arrive from connector as well. He's going to be the man to get the kills as this plays out. And you're going to see as the push comes in, that there's just no way in for Navi here. They're coming out through upper, but because Gambit have survived for so long, all these players, all these angles, they can't deal with. And at the end here, Navi have to go for a desperation play, which was never really going to work out. We'll show you Axar's POV because he's able to just get between those trains. He knows the rotate has to come in down Pop Dog, and he kind of flubs this kill slightly, but he gets it eventually, helps them close out the round. And this is a really nice round of Gambit, just making sure they don't fall for any of that fake pressure. They always get just that little bit of information, and it's enough to make them feel confident in those very fast rotates. And then those B players do a great job at just staying alive as well and establishing all those angles on the side.
Yeah, getting information seems to be a big part of Gambit's success as a team, right? I think Cadian was given an interview where he was saying how Gambit are actually one of the best teams he plays against to getting info, just jiggling for that info, and it allows them to play their game plan. And while we have a spotlight here for Maui Snake, you're going to take a look at Gambit's CT side and really focus in on that because that's where you feel they have their strengths.
Yeah, I think Gambit are, like you said, I mean, it's a combination for me. I actually don't think it's completely just info. I feel like they make a lot of great reads, which are probably based off of prep, because that round that Hawka just showed, I feel like is just such a demonstration of how Gambit, they didn't 100% know, but they kind of read the situation so well with the info that they had. So I wouldn't say that they always like need to throw their body at the problems that I'll see a lot of other CIS teams do, but they just have so much experience as a team, and they know how to outline their kind of plan B situation that even if their info is wrong or they make a wrong read, I love that you showed Axile after, because the way he just slotted himself in that hell position, even if it were an A play, he's probably good for at least a couple of kills. And so I think the stat that jumps out to me the most at this, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor on this, but if you can't,
yeah, we can.
We can.
Okay, it's the 4v5 situations on the CT side where they lose the entry kill on CT but win the round 52% of the rounds on train. That is an insane number for me, and I think that the fact that they can just set up in a lot of just kind of 3-man A setups or just 2-man B setups and get saved by the fact that there's always players available to go for trades or to just really just still be able to lock down those situations. It's something that a lot of other teams definitely have a lot of difficulty with, but Gambit for me, I feel like this was just kind of the perfect storm. And I feel like these stats are other things about it, just the post plans at B, on top of that, the retake performance that they defuse the bomb. 66% of the time retaking B, it's not the hardest bomb site to retake, but doing it that frequently, even in 4v5s, they do it 80% of the time. If I'm reading this right, they are retaking B on 4v5s 80% of the time. That's insane.
Nuts.
I feel like so many things had to go right for Gambit in this tournament. Credit to them for this one, but when you asked me earlier, Dinko, about kind of longevity, I almost feel like things for Gambit went a little too well. I almost feel like I couldn't always point to every single situation that worked out, other than a certain particular person getting a multi-frag, maybe sometimes off of individual skill, but I will say that their prep did look very good because they looked so comfortable in so many situations.
Yeah, they just played a perfect game a lot of the time, right? You look at some of their setups and some of their halves, they just played a perfect Counter-Strike, very little mistakes, 80% of the time retaking the B side. At that point, if you're their opponents on T side, why are you even going B? Because even if you get the bomb plant, you're not going to win the round. Exactly. It's unreal. It's absolutely unreal. And obviously, that is CSGO Spotlight. It's software being developed by a bunch of Brazilian guys. They've got some incredible stuff, working with some of the best Brazilian teams. I think they've got a lot more on the way as well, so we'll be continuing to see their updates. But moving on and really diving deep into Gambit. Obviously, we look at this team overall. We just know how good they are across the board. They've got all the pieces right now. You got that Awping in the form of Sh1ro. Navi's doing a good job at in-game leading. He has said he was getting a little bit of help in the mid rounds, but Sh1ro and Hobbit obviously chiming in. But it feels like Inters is just a very good player in his role as well. It seems like this team just has a great blend of players. And the MVP of the tournament, of course, has to be Sh1ro based on how he performed. So when you look at Sh1ro as the MVP, this guy was just breaking numbers, clutches just continuously coming through. This guy was just on form.
This is, I mean, Sh1ro's coming out party. I mean, I feel like when we've been on the DreamHack desks, we've seen this. We know
Yep.
we knew he was capable of this the whole time. And Bleh, I'm sure you've seen some just magical moments from him before, and this was just like, okay, finally he's doing it against tier 1 opposition.
I wouldn't just say just tier 1, that like he's doing it against opposition which are a couple, like 2 or 3 tiers above what he's playing against in DreamHack Opens, right? Because usually in the Opens he's playing against his team are one of the favorites, and you have some of these teams who we haven't even heard of, who just qualified from the regional qualifiers and whatnot. So for him to deliver like this, it's very impressive. And that gives me hope that when LAN play does resume, he's going to be able to maintain the same thing. Because let's look at it, right? He has no trouble clutching against tier 2, tier 3 opposition. He's doing the same thing against tier 1, right? In the biggest event he's ever played. And now, when it transitions eventually towards LAN, maybe it's going to be the same. Maybe this kid is a real thing. I still don't agree with everyone, saying he's an ex-Simple. Come on, like, Simple's done way fucking more than Sh1ro ever has, even online. So give me a fucking break. But the kid has real promise. I'm excited to see him down the line.
I mean, you just can't be the next Simple. Like, that's just such a difficult thing to do. The man's inhuman. And while Hockey, we look at Sh1ro, I mean, we've seen him come up a lot of the time. Our casting career has been alongside this guy, really just coming up from the Gambit youngsters being put together. And we've seen him at Copenhagen Games. We've seen him at his first sort of breakout LAN in 2019. And he's just been steadily getting better. I think he has now hit the peak of his career so far. I think, obviously, with winning Katowice, but more so just that performance. Like, we see little glimpses of this, but having that consistency that he did throughout this entire tournament is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I remember as well at that Copenhagen Games event, they were never really even meant to qualify for the tournament, I don't think, because they had to go up against Godsent in a LAN qualifier with Pronax, and Sh1ro had insane numbers in that series. I remember thinking at the time, I'm still not sure if this guy's going to be able to make it because of that passive AWP style. Like, everyone saw that crazy clutch on Inferno, but I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to consistently be able to pull that off. Obviously proved me wrong at this tournament, won bloody 19 clutches with the AWP, crazy numbers. But as well, I think something that's really cool about actually both Sh1ro and Jame is their opening deaths per round is crazy low for this tournament. They have like the lowest numbers I've pretty much ever seen. 0.04 opening deaths per round. They're basically never dying first. And obviously it helps that they're playing that passive style, but it's just so almost like efficient is the way I'd describe it, where it's like they're never giving up the opening pick. They are getting the opening pick still fairly often, like enough of the time. They're just giving themselves really high percentage fights. And then if the round doesn't go according to plan, obviously we know James is prone to a save, but you can always keep that AWP, and it definitely affects how the other team can play up against you.
See, the thing is with Jame, obviously, he's obviously had the memes. And I think his game style has actually developed a little bit. I see more of him taking some risks now than he used to. Like, he used to just not go for anything, but he does put his life on the line every now and then, Bleh, and actually has some big moments out of it. I feel like he's really starting to develop even further, and we've seen that in this tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like if you look at some of his games, sure, it is ridiculous how what his KD is, even when his team seems to be losing. But I feel like on the T side especially, he has really kind of started to come into his own, which is really good to know, right? Like, which is really good to see, because the guy is not, people tend to forget how quick this guy is because of his Awping style, where he plays a much more safe rank. He plays a more device-esque style of Awping on the CD side, but we know this guy can hit some ridiculous flicks, and we've seen that. And so for him to kind of apply that on the T side is something I've been personally excited. We saw that against Liquid as well in Mirage, where it was Yakinder and him just a 1-2 wombo combo against Liquid, and he was just not just outplaying, but out-skilling and outplaying and outgunning some of the players in Liquid, some of the best aimers in the world. So great to see James' kind of mini evolution here.
And you know what as well, Bleh, just quickly, all right? You know those few rounds on Mirage where Jame actually like went aggressive and started making these crazy plays? Like, oh my God, if he can add that to his game as well, then I'm really excited.
Yeah, I feel like with Jame Maui, he is a player that's just calling as well. So that's something a lot of people forget is he's actually calling this team, and we see him sit back and actually a lot of pros, when the ESL were doing these sort of like interviews before the matches started, a lot of the pros were giving props to Jame as being a good caller in terms of he sits back, he gathers info that way. And I think what we've seen from VP from a tactical level is actually very exciting. So the fact that he's not only able to deliver on the individual level he's doing so, also calling is very impressive as a player overall.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Jame is actually weirdly underrated. It's just he's a guy that
he's not just a meme, guys. It's not just a meme.
It's not just a meme, but I think his skill is just so high. I think
Speaking
the
of
only
Sanji.
thing for most people, when they look at this roster and they look at Jame in particular, it's just that his play sometimes it just feels it's like. How can you do this to Counterstrike? You get the most expensive gun and you play this passively. Some rounds, it doesn't make sense to us all. But you know what? At the end of the day, they've been getting the results. And at the end of the day, I mean, Jame, he does come up with those gigantic clutches for VP. And he bails them out of rounds. I'm just glad that he goes for more of them, okay? Because when he used to save all the time, it did suck. It sucked to watch. I'm not gonna lie, but now it's fun because watching Jame try to win a 1v3, 2v4, I like it because he's good. He's really good.
He did win a 1v3 by saving though in the finals. Just saying.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, because he just stayed alive. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. I mean, I casted an event with Vendetta like 2 years ago, maybe at this point, and it was when it was just some sort of qualifier for one of the big ESL events. I think it might have been Cologne. And we were watching Jame, and he would literally, it would be at a 1v5 last round of the game. You lost the map, and he would just go save the gun for like 35 seconds, and it was just the most boring thing to watch. So thank God he doesn't do that as much anymore. But nonetheless, Jame, that he is a player to always look for in the future for VP. But another player that from Gambit that we didn't really talk about had an incredible performance in that grand final was, of course, their veteran player who is 26 years old and is the veteran player of this team now and was a major MVP himself in the past, is Hobbit. So, I mean, this guy, where do we stand here, Hawk? Because he was popping off in that grand final.
Oh yeah, in the final, he really stepped up. I think if he'd have had a couple more maps prior to that in the tournament that he really stood out in, he could have been in contention for that MVP for sure. Like, obviously, Sh1ro had a nuts tournament, but Hobbit just came into this team. And I remember when he first came into the team, there were actually some critics of the move because Supra looked pretty damn good on this team beforehand. That they actually had almost an embarrassment of riches on this Gambit squad. But I think just getting a veteran player in was always going to be important for them. Even if he didn't necessarily play that well, it would have been nice for them to have. But he has played well. Like, he's become a proper star for this team. I think he had the highest ADR for them at this tournament as one of those riflers on this squad. He's just slotted in and done exactly what I needed him to do on this team, right? Just a solid star player, another one of those guys that you know you're kind of going to be able to rely on in a lot of these spots. And in the final, he was making a bunch of massive plays as well, which we hadn't really seen from him up until that point in the tournament. I don't know if that's the CIS matchup or if he's maybe just the most experienced player able to live up to the pressure. But hey, he played really well in the final, and that's what I needed him to do. I just need him to step up in these high pressure moments for this team, and he did it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird thinking of Hobbit because we still think of him as a pretty fresh player, considering he only came into Gambit. He was kind of nobody knew exactly who he was. Fresh rookie coming in, wins a major, gets the MVP. He's on everybody's radar, and then he dropped off, and that whole team kind of disappeared. And he went and started playing in Windstrike with Bondic, and that team just wasn't very good at all. And he kind of floated along in the wind, and we were really worrying about Hobbit and where he was going to end up, you know. And he finally is back in Gambit. He's performing again here, and Bleh, you know, for Hobbit in the future. do you think we're going to get to see Hobbit play consistently at this level? Because yes, he's won championships before, but he did drop off. Now it's his second chance to do it and actually keep it up.
Yeah, I think it's gonna kind of slot into this question. Gonna slot into my thoughts on Gambit and how they won this event. Right, firstly, they played great Counterstrike, taking nothing away from them, but they did do something which we haven't seen from them at all. Would be everyone having the time to shine. Hobbit stepping up like this at the level he did against a team like VP, which was for me, it was surprising. It was a great surprise. Don't get me wrong, but still, like, is that consistent, right? Sh1ro being a fantastic, we already knew how good he was. We already knew how good Axel was. But even Axel has his ups and downs. In this event, he had more ups and downs, even compared to some of the DreamHack Opens we've seen him in. We saw Nefani step up as well as an in-game leader, looking fantastic. Inters as well, going big. So it feels like Gambit played great Counter-Strike. It was some very good prep work coming in as well. Good everything, right? But I feel like the individuals having probably some of the most consistently good performances I've ever seen from them, especially over one long tournament. I feel it had a lot to play. Now, whether that is going to be a thing going forward, time will tell. I don't think it's that sustainable. I think that could be a problem. I think that could be the only flaw I see in this Gambit lineup. I'd like to see more, but I feel like it felt like everything just clicking for them, especially the individuality of all these players. So I don't know. I don't think it's sustainable. So I don't think they're going to be able to be this good going forward in the next couple of big events.
Well, we've tried to ask some very big questions. We've tried to answer them. I think we've done a fair job at that. We've covered every CIS team we've talked about. Well, apart from Navi, wasn't really too much to talk about there, unfortunately, from them. But
Simple's still good, by the way.
He is very, very, good still. Good. But, you know, we looked across the board. We've broken down everything from Katowice, and that is about it here for Post-Plan Episode 2. We're going to be back after Pro League, so we're going to have plenty of action coming up after this. We'll start planning the show. We have a lot more time to get things going, so we'll iron out some issues. We'll get some more stuff added in. It's going to be a great show. You guys don't want to miss it. Thanks to the panel for joining me as usual. And we will catch you guys in the next episode, just April 12th, I believe it'll be. So make sure you tune in then. There'll be posts on Twitter all over, and we'll have a lot of time to make the show good. See you guys then.